For me, one especially discouraging occasion was the fight against Ronald Reagan's decision in 1983 to station medium-range missiles in Europe to counter the Soviet buildup of similar missiles on its side of the dividing line between its domain and the West. Massive protests were planned here at home and all over the world, with the biggest one scheduled for The Hague, to which over 1 million people from every country in Western Europe were streaming by plane, by bus, and on foot. In order to cover it, the Dutch broadcasters had erected a glass booth overlooking the square to which the protesters were all marching, and they invited pundits from various European countries to sit there and comment on this great event. Evidently, however, they were unable to find anyone in the whole of Europe willing or able to support Reagan's decision, which is why I received a panicky call at the last minute inviting me to participate. So desperate were they to spice up their discussion with an affirmative action fascist, a role I often played in those days, that they even offered to fly me over on the monstrously expensive Concorde. And so it came about that a few hours later, I found myself arguing for nearly a whole day against 4 relentless opponents, 5 if you count the moderator, who made Candy Crowley seem a model of impartiality. all the while watching the biggest crowd I had ever seen or ever would see, carrying anti-American signs and chanting anti-American slogans. No wonder then that I felt, neither for the first nor for the last time, as if we anti-communists were all alone and up against the whole world, including that part of it we were dedicating to defending, and that we could not possibly prevail against odds like that. Thanks be to God, I was wrong. But there were other occasions on which, with greater justification, I felt just as gloomy about our struggle in the world of ideas. By the 1970s, the favorite tactic of the anti-communists was not to defend communism. That had become too hard to do even for actual communists, but to attack America. This country, they said, was oppressive and repressive at home, as witness the persistence of such evils as racism and poverty, and it was also a force for evil in international affairs, as witness its war in Vietnam and its opposition to any and every movement by the peoples of the Third World to improve their lot. This particular species of anti-Americanism began its long march through the institutions of American culture in the 1960s, as Professor Hill mentioned earlier, and within an amazingly short time, it had thoroughly infected, to round up the usual suspects, the universities, the mainstream media, and the arts, both low and high. But it also had the unanticipated consequence of jolting some of us into a discovery, or in some cases a rediscovery, of the virtues that, as we now realized, made this country not merely worth defending against its ideological enemies, but into something much more than that. I myself even went so far as to place America among the highest points of human civilization, on a par with Periclean Athens, or the Italy of the Medicis, or Elizabethan England, or the Russia of Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. Unlike them, America did not belong on that list because of its achievements in the arts. It belonged there because, by remaining on the whole loyal to the principles affirmed in the Declaration of Independence, it had developed into a country in which there was more liberty and more prosperity, more widely shared than in any other nation in the history of the world. If Whittaker Chambers had lived to hear it, he would probably have been shocked by that statement. He most certainly did not partake of the anti-Americanism of the left, but there was also a bitter critique of America on the right, in which he most certainly did partake. This critique goes all the way back to the earliest days of the Republic, and it focuses on what has been mentioned several times already, the alleged materialism of American life, the putative crassness of its culture, and its supposedly Philistine indifference or hostility to things of the spirit, all of which were seen to flow from what Tocqueville, even Tocqueville, called, quote, the exclusively commercial habits that he claimed were bred in the American bone. This is pretty much how Whittaker Chambers felt. And he became a communist because he had come to believe that the America shaped by its exclusively commercial habits, capitalism, in other words, had reached the end of its tether, and that communism was the only alternative on offer with the vision and the power to save whatever might be worth salvaging out of a dying civilization. Yet, when he finally discovered that the evils of communism were infinitely greater than those he attributed to capitalism, he did not thereby come to the conclusion that he had been wrong about America. America under capitalism remained in his ideas a society dying of its own soullessness, which is why he could say that in breaking with communism he was leaving the winning side for the losing side, but why he could not say that he was leaving the side of evil for the side of good. And this is also why Witness, surely among the greatest books ever written about communism, is, I am afraid, of little help as a guide to what conservatism can or should be without anti-communism. For neither in Witness nor in later years did Chambers change his mind about the free market. Indeed, he even preferred Galbraith to Hayek, leading one of his colleagues on National Review to complain that he talked, and now I'm quoting, as if the right must acquiesce in the socialist needs and hopes of the masses when the purpose of National Review was to make the opposition case. It's a good thing then that that was Willy Schlamm, by the way. It's a good thing then that with the exception of a born-again Coughlinite like Pat Buchanan and his fellow paleos, conservatism without anti-communism has not followed in the anti-capitalist footsteps of Chambers. It's a good thing that it has instead remained united by the truth that economic freedom is an indispensable constituent element of freedom in general, and that it must therefore be defended against all comers, emphatically not excluding the present administration. Nevertheless, I would argue that this belief, while necessary, is not sufficient, and that it needs to be extended to a proper appreciation of why and how the United States of America has become one of the highest points in the history of civilization. Furthermore, contrary to what most liberals and even some conservatives contend, the United States has also been an exceptionally powerful force for good in the world at large. If not for the United States, despised and patronized by intellectuals everywhere, both on the left and the right, many millions of people who are now living in freedom would still be suffering under the totalitarian horrors of Nazism and communism. What I'm trying to say is that if conservatism without anti-communism is to become as vital again as it was with anti-communism, it will have to open its eyes more fully to the greatness of America, and it will have to fight as passionate a war against anti-Americanism, whether on the left or the right, as Whittaker Chambers once so nobly did against communism. Thank you.